Recording in progress. Good morning. Today, as Doc so eloquently laid out for us, is the 14th of Shevat, January 24th. We're very excited today because we have Ziv David in person at the Tanya shir. He usually joins us on the Zoom. Okay, overview of chapter 21. Charlie, you ready? We're in the Chayenu, page 98. In the Chayenu again, 14th of Shevat, January 24th. The overview of chapter 21. In this chapter, the difference between human speech and divine speech is explained. If you're listening and not watching, I did quotation marks for speech, for Hashem's speech. Once a word is spoken, it leaves the speaker and assumes its independence. Whereas with Hashem, nothing leaves his oneness and being. There's only the illusion of separateness from our perception. But truly, with Hashem, everything is one. Chapter Chaf Aleph, chapter 21. The nature of the divine is not like that of human being, a creature of flesh and blood. Therefore, human terms cannot adequately describe divine qualities. Did we talk about this yesterday? I think we did. We touched on how all the words and terms that are used are the Torah's way of allowing us to have a relationship with what God does, because otherwise we wouldn't have an inkling. So it's clearly it's not a good example, or it's not a good description of what God does. But the Torah says, "Vayomer Hashem," and God spoke. God doesn't have a mouth. God does everything. Exactly. The Torah speaks in the language of man. Thank you, Doc. Sha'adam k'shmedaber dibur harei hevel hadibur b'fiv umurgosh v'nira davar b'fnei atzmai muvdo mishar she'hein esed b'chinas hanefesh atzmo. By the way, we're going to go on and on to show how it's impossible to have a relationship with a God because he's so far removed and nothing changes with God from his perspective and from our perspective. Then we're going to bring it all the way back down and show how, with all of that said, Hashem is waiting for us to fulfill the mitzvahs with ahava and yira, to get closer to God through love and awe and fear and everything else. So just if we go through a different track here and there, it all comes around. Just try to follow along. I would say it's the same thing but different than learning Gemara. You learn Gemara, you go off on a tangent like, how did we even get here? So when a person says something, the breadth of the spoken word may be sensed and is perceived as an independent entity. I say the word, it becomes separate from me. And sure enough, it disappears after a while. It's not part of me anymore. And what's its source? The 10 intellectual and emotional faculties of the soul. While still encapsulated in the source, the word is utterly nullified. However, when it is spoken and it leaves its source, it takes on its own identity. This is true, however, only with regard to human speech. But it's interesting, in this room, you hear a little bit of an echo. So it's separate because the word goes out, you hear it out there. It's good aesthetics for the chazan, but also for the talkers. So everything works both ways. I like the way you're looking at it from a positive light. That's perfect. I notice a lot of change. Okay. Aval Kadosh Baruch Hu ein dibur moved on mimenu yispare chas v'shalom ki ein davar chutz mimenu v'leis asar ponu minei. When it comes to Hashem's speech, it's not like when we speak. When did we say these words? It was funny, you said a few words, but that was a moment ago. It doesn't exist anymore. It's completely separate from you, and it's out of your system. With Hashem, it's different. Nothing is outside of God, because God is everything, and no place is devoid of Hashem. So when Hashem spoke the two of the 10 commandments, which is inclusive of all the commandments, which we just learned, there was no echo. That's why I brought that up. There was no echo. Because for us, it's us saying the word, and then there's The rest of the room is separate from us. As soon as it goes outside, it's out of our mouths. It's separate from ourselves. But with Hashem, everything is part of Hashem. So there was no echo at all. Everything, it's not projecting, it's part of. It's hard to understand, I know, even for me. So that his speech is always contained within him. It's not going out of his mouth. There is no mouth, but I'm saying it's not projecting out. There is no out or in. It's all Hashem. L'chein, I know it's. I'll cup a minute. L'chein, ein diburi yisparach ki diburi chas v'shalom ki diburi einu chas v'shalom k'may she'ein machshava k'machshavaseinu k'dechsiv ki lo machshavaisai machshavaseichem udechsiv kein gavu drachai midarchechem. His speech is not like our speech, God forbid. Just as obvious, his thought is not like our thought, as the pasuk says, "For my thoughts are not like your thoughts," in Yeshayahu, and it also says over there, "So are my ways higher than your ways, my thoughts higher than your thoughts," etc. Similarly, God's speech is very different than our speech. Obviously, not very different, completely different. It's not speech. Yeah, it wasn't like speech. It wasn't like speech. It was very different. I don't know. I don't think we should.
It's like Chazal say that when the Torah is an expression of God, it says that God has a mighty hand, like that. It's using a muscle for us to understand. It's using a muscle. What does it mean?
Okay, stop. We mentioned this. We mentioned this yesterday already. Let's have that discussion together. We're almost done because people are waiting for the recording and there's just dead air right now. I don't like the word dead. There's blank air. Okay, but hold that thought. If divine speech is indeed never separate from Hashem, how can it be described as speech? This answers your question. Human speech constitutes communication only because the spoken word becomes separate from the speaker. That is, according to this school of thought, that's the definition of speech. Thought, by contrast, remains within one's soul. If it wasn't articulated, then it's not speech. It's still in the person's mind. Thought remains within one's soul and is hidden from everyone except for the thinker. But since nothing ever becomes separate from Hashem, the term speech, quote unquote, seemingly provides us with no understanding at all of the nature of divine communication. So we're explaining divine communication. Sometimes we just have to wait, and then by the time we get to the end of the class, our question will be answered, or we'll have a discussion about what that means. So an explanation, the Alter Rebbe states that speech is distinguished by two characteristics. A, it reveals that which was previously hidden in the speaker's thoughts. You want to reveal which is in your mind, okay? A. And B, it becomes separate from its source. Only the former characteristic of human speech is analogous to divine speech, which reveals the creation, that which was hidden within Hashem. Okay, so in the Alter Rebbe's words, let's break that down. When we call it speech, God's speech is not really speech. It's just to illustrate that quality of revelation. As we said before, you have something in your mind, you want to reveal it. Either you're going to write it down so somebody could read those words, or you have to say it out loud. Otherwise, unless, what other way is there? Sign language, maybe. But you have to express it some way. So the way most of us express it is through speech. Okay, writing it down. We didn't get to that, and it's not written here, but it's the same thing. We're talking about speech. It's either you're formulating your letters into words or you're formulating your letters on paper. Oh, thank you. And you're going to be a lawyer, right? So in law, say it again, written speech is the same as speech. It's probably even more, because once it's written down, you can bring that as documentation and proof. Speech that was spoken has to be recorded somehow. Otherwise, it's hard to bring it to court. I heard so-and-so say so and such, right?
Hearsay.
Hearsay, right? Okay. So Hashem's speech is only to illustrate the quality of revelation which it possesses. For just as man's speech reveals to his audience that which was hidden and concealed in his thoughts, so too the emergence of light and life force of the Ein Sof from concealment before creation into revelation through the act of creation for the purpose of creating and animating the worlds is called speech, quote unquote, because it reveals that which God is thinking, so to speak. In this case, the audience is a created being from which from its own perspective, we feel separate from Hashem. This is kind of stepping into a new thing. So we understand what we're saying here. The reason why it's called speech is when we want to reveal what we're thinking, we speak. And the reason why it's called speech from a divine perspective is God wanted to reveal, and this is the way he reveals what his intentions are. And he turns something into creation. In this case, we feel like we're a created being because that's the way God designed us, with a mind of our own, with hands, with our own thought process, with a mouth to speak, with a feeling of independence, free choice. But that's from our perspective. And these revelations of divine light and life force that comprise the 10 divine utterances, recorded in Torah, namely, and Hashem says, "Let there be light." That was a joke. You like that? We have a minute here. If someone sneezes, we say, "Shh." Let there be light. It means sugizon. Let there be light, and let the earth sprout. Let the earth sprout forth, and so on, by which the world was created. So these are part of the 10 utterances that Hashem used in order to bring forth growth and life in this world. Likewise, all the other words of the Torah, the prophets, and the holy writings are also called speech, even though they were not revealed for the purpose of creation. There's many things in the Torah that wasn't just about creation, even though they're not revealed for the purpose of creation, since they too represent the divine revelation, which the prophets perceived in their prophetic vision. Hence, when we refer to Hashem's revelation as speech, the analogy extends only to speech as revelation and communication, but not to speech as something separate from the speaker, an idea which is not applicable to godliness. When we speak, it's separate. When God speaks, it's not separate from him. So the takeaway is, Hashem does not speak. God doesn't have a mouth. There's no words that come out. But the word of Hashem is God revealing himself and communicating with man. Even the word communicating is put in quotation marks because it's when we communicate, we speak or we motion or we wink. That's a form of communication, or we write. Hashem doesn't do that. It's all analogies in order to, what did Doc say before? Torah speaks in the language of man so that we can understand how to have a relationship with the creator of the universe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that concludes the recording part. Now we're going to have a heated discussion. And if you want to be a part of it, you got to come in person like Ziv did today. Have a good day, everyone.